Okay, so we all know that food fuels our bodies, right? But what if it's also fueling our minds in ways we're only just starting to really get a handle on? That's what we're digging into today. The powerful, scientific link between what's on your plate and what's going on in your head. Let's dive in.
I mean, have you ever stopped to think about it? Could the lunch you had today actually be shaping your mood, your focus, or even how you handle stress? It's a really big question, and you know what? The science is starting to give us some pretty amazing answers.
Okay, so here's the game plan. We'll start with the big picture food-mood connection. Then we'll zoom in on the biology of your brain on your plate. From there, we'll look at the hard evidence, the proof in the pudding. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with the future of food and your main takeaway.
All right, let's kick things off with that big picture. When scientists step back and look at thousands, and I mean thousands of people over many years, what patterns do they actually see between diet and our mental well-being? Well, it turns out it pretty much boils down to two very different patterns that just keep showing up in the research, again and again. On one side, you have what scientists call a higher quality diet. You know, the good stuff, rich in whole foods. And on the other side, well, that's the ultra-processed diet, loaded with refined sugars and saturated fats.
And what's so wild is just how consistent the results are. For example, a big study back in 2009 found that people who stuck closer to a Mediterranean diet had a way lower risk of developing depression. And that's not just a one-off. A huge 2020 review confirmed it across the board. Higher quality diets are consistently linked to better mental health, while ultra-processed ones are tied to a greater risk for depression and anxiety. The correlation is super strong. But that begs the question, how does it actually work?
And that's the perfect lead-in to our next part. We've seen the what, so now let's dive into the how. I mean, how on earth can a salad or a burger actually translate into real biological changes inside your brain?
Okay, so one of the main culprits that scientists are pointing to is something called chronic low-grade inflammation. The best way to think about it is like a constant low-level fire simmering throughout your body. And guess what? Your diet is a huge factor in controlling the thermostat on that fire.
And to actually measure this, which is pretty cool, researchers have a tool called the Dietary Inflammatory Index, or DII for short. It's basically a way to score your diet to figure out if the food you eat is fanning those flames or helping to put them out. And when you look at the data, wow, the findings are really striking. Major scientific reviews have confirmed that people eating a pro-inflammatory diet, one with a high DII score, have a significantly higher risk for depression. So let's be super clear here. The food we eat directly impacts inflammation, and that inflammation directly impacts our brain.
But wait, inflammation isn't the whole story. Not by a long shot. There's this other absolutely fascinating player in the game, the microbiota gut-brain axis. This is basically a superhighway of communication, a constant two-way street between the trillions of tiny microbes living in your gut and your brain itself.
And it works in basically 3 steps. It's actually pretty straightforward. First, what you eat literally changes the neighborhood of bacteria living in your gut. Step 2, those bacteria then get to work, digesting your food and producing all these new chemicals. And here's the kicker, step 3, those chemicals don't just hang out in your gut. Nope, they travel through your bloodstream and nervous system all the way up to your brain, where they can influence everything from your mood to how you handle stress.
Okay, so we've got inflammation and we've got the gut, but there's also a much more direct, almost mechanical connection. Think about it like this. A car factory needs steel, right? It needs rubber and glass. Well, your brain is the same. It needs specific raw materials to build its most critical parts. For example, omega-3 fatty acids are literally what the membranes of your brain cells are made of. Then there are B vitamins and magnesium. You can't make essential mood-regulating chemicals without them. Amino acids, they're the literal building blocks for stuff like serotonin and dopamine. And antioxidants are like the rust-proofing for your brain. And where do you get all this stuff? Only one place, your diet.
All right, so we've got some really strong links, and we've got some solid ideas about how it all works biologically. But, and this is a big but, can we actually prove that changing your diet causes a change in mental health? To do that, we got to look at the gold standard of science, the clinical trial.
And this brings us to a huge, game-changing study called the SMILES trial. This was published back in 2017, and its whole goal was to test a really simple but honestly revolutionary idea. Could you actually use food, use a specific diet, to treat major depression?
So here's what they did. They took a group of people dealing with moderate to severe depression and split them in two. One group got social support, which we know is helpful, but the other group, they got sessions with a dietitian to help them switch to a modified Mediterranean diet. And the results? They were incredible. The group that changed their diet saw a way bigger drop in their depression scores. We're not talking a tiny little blip here. This was a major clinical effect.
And you don't have to take my word for it. The authors of the study themselves said it best. They concluded that improving diet could be an effective and, importantly, an accessible treatment strategy for depression. This was a massive moment for this whole field, which we now call nutritional psychiatry.
Okay, but in science, one study, even a great one, is never the final word. You always have to ask, was the SMILES trial just a lucky fluke, or did other studies find the same thing? Well, in 2019, researchers did what's called a meta-analysis. They basically gathered up all the best studies out there and crunched the numbers together. And guess what? It confirmed the finding. When you look at all the evidence combined, dietary changes lead to statistically significant reductions in depression symptoms. Statistically significant is just science speak for this is real. It's not a coincidence. This is the moment the evidence truly shifted from just a link to actual causation. So, okay, we've looked at the huge population studies, we've gone into the biology, we've even looked at the clinical trials. After all of that, what's the one big idea you should walk away with? Here it is, and it's really important to get this balance right. Diet is not a magic bullet. It is not a cure-all. It doesn't replace things like therapy or medication for people who need them, but it is an incredibly powerful, foundational, and, this is the best part, a totally modifiable tool in your personal mental health toolkit. It's one of the few things you have direct control over every single day. And that really just leaves us with one final, pretty profound question to think about. In our search for ways to feel better and support our minds, what if one of the most powerful prescriptions we have isn't in a bottle, but has been right there on our plate the whole time? It's definitely food for thought.